What's up, guys? Bang, bang. Huge week in the macroeconomic environment and with Bitcoin. First up, the Federal Reserve. They are committed to bringing inflation down. They went ahead and they raised interest rates another 25 basis points. This brings us to a 5.25 to 5.5% interest rate, which is a 22-year high. When they said that they were going to crash asset prices and get inflation under control, they weren't playing around. Now, of course, this past week, we also saw another bank failure, PacWest, getting bought by one of their smaller rivals, Bank of California. Now, the reason why that's important is because nobody cared. Did you read about it? The mainstream media barely even talked about it. We now have gotten to a point where there are so many bank failures happening that nobody cares and nobody pays attention. But Bitcoin also does not care about any of that nonsense in the financial markets. It's looking at the economy and it's laughing at it. What do I mean? Bitcoin is up about 80% to start the year, and 55% of all Bitcoin has not moved in 2 years. That's 55% of the just over 19 million Bitcoin in circulating supply that has not moved in 2 years. Those are long-term holders who are holding the asset and they ain't giving it up. Then if we go and we look around the world, we see that BlackRock, they published this paper, a couple authors from over at the big financial institution, and they say that the optimal Bitcoin allocation is over 80%. It's like 85% based on their mathematics. Now, of course, I'm not Einstein, you're not either, but if BlackRock says it's true, then obviously it must be true. The Bitcoin network has now settled $110 trillion of transaction volume. So the next time that your uncle at Thanksgiving dinner or that annoying kid down the street tells you no one uses Bitcoin, remind them, well, enough people used it to settle $110 trillion worth of transactions. Then let's run on up right to Capitol Hill. Congress has now passed one of the crypto regulation bills. This is a big deal because we not only saw Republicans, but also 6 Democrats cross over the aisle and start having a little bipartisanship. It's about time we all started working together and trying to figure out how we could create a regulatory environment to keep innovation here in America. Now, there's 2 other big names this week who had something to say about Bitcoin. First, we have Tim Draper. Tim Draper's been a longtime Bitcoin bull. He's been talking about Bitcoin prices in the hundreds of thousands for years. But now Tim Draper's taking it a step further. He says that he believes Bitcoin will be superior to all other fiats. Here's what Tim had to say.
But it's also going to rise above fiat. And I think it's just better technology. I mean, having to have a bank and a government decide on what currency is good is not as effective as having a Bitcoin where you have a trusted third party, which is hundreds of thousands of nodes out there checking to make sure that the transaction was done properly. So I think it's just better, safer technology, and eventually the rest of the world will come on.
And Tim, he's not the only one with big, grand ambitions for Bitcoin. We also had Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the presidential candidate who's got a lot of hot takes all over Twitter. He came out and he said that his plan is to back US dollars with Bitcoin. Now, this may seem like an insane idea, and I don't even know if I necessarily agree with it as a good idea. But here is exactly what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will do if he becomes your president.
Exempting Bitcoin from exchange taxes is almost a perfect analogy for that, and we ought to be doing that in the United States. Secondly, the Kennedy administration will begin to back the U.S. dollar with real finite assets such as gold, silver, platinum, and Bitcoin, which is the world's hardest liquid asset, to strengthen the U.S. dollar and guarantee its continued success as the world reserve currency. This will include U.S. Treasury bills, notes, and bonds. My plan would be to start very, very small. Perhaps 1% of issued T-bills would be backed by hard currency, by gold, silver, platinum, or Bitcoin. And then, depending on the outcome, we would increase that annually. And what this will do is it will ironically, we will be able to use Bitcoin to help save the U.S. dollar. You know, I was in Cleveland 10 days ago in the Lee Harbor district of Cleveland, which is one of the poorest districts in Cleveland. I got absolutely the business in that district. It's almost all African American. We're almost completely wiped out by the COVID epidemic. there are few remaining businesses, and they are now being wiped out, not by inflation. Of course, everybody, the poor, are being decimated by inflation in this country, and people on fixed incomes. And Bitcoin would be a hedge against that. But they're being wiped out now by high interest rates, which is the remedy, the government's remedy, the Fed's remedy for inflation. The high interest rates have devalued the value of T-bills, which are, and so many of the local and community banks that serve those communities are now hoarding their liquid assets. They're hoarding their T-bills, and they're not making loans. And I met with an African-American woman who had one of the few surviving businesses in that community. It's a sausage business that had been in her family for 80 years. And she's closing it now because she cannot get a small loan, even a small loan, from a local bank. They're simply unavailable because the banks are not putting any liquidity into those communities. And we need to change that. And one of the ways to change that is to strengthen the perception and the value of T-bills so that they do not degrade like that. And this is a way of doing that. And Bitcoin is part of the basket of hard currencies that I think that the Kennedy administration is going to encourage the proliferation of and the propagation of. And I mentioned many reforms that I'm committed to in my Bitcoin 2023 speech, including self-custody. Your wallet should be your own. The capacity of people to run, of American citizens, others to run Bitcoin or to run nodes inside their own homes. The policy of industry neutral regulation of energy, and my administration's mission of making America the global hub of cryptocurrency, particularly Bitcoin, as a means of incentivizing greater investment in green and energy and renewable energy production and attracting engineering, investment, and innovation to our country.
All right. I hope you enjoyed this roundup of what's been going on in the Bitcoin world and the macro economy. There's lots of uncertainty in the future, but what we see is a highly illiquid market, and there's a ton of people, politicians, large financial institutions, and retail investors who continue to be interested in this asset. My guess is that over a long period of time, Bitcoin will continue to produce block after block after block of transactions, doing exactly what it was designed to do. That's the beauty of Bitcoin. In a world of chaos, in a world of noise, Bitcoin doesn't care.